So this video just relates to the fourth tutorial that I've uploaded called the constant scale exercise, Jazz Skills for Constant Scale. And on that tutorial, what I've looked at is how to thread modes as they're changing. You change the scale every single 4 beats, and it's what's known as the constant scale exercise. And if you watch that video first, that provides the context for what I'm about to talk about here. But what I wanted to show bass players, or in fact guitarists, is how I adapt the constant scale exercise onto the actual bass when I'm practicing it. So the idea is really, if I'm playing the first 8 bars of Autumn Leaves, C minor 7, F major 7, which I'm going to make as an F7 flat 9, okay? B flat major 7, E flat major 7th, A minor 7 flat 5, D7, I'm going to make this into an altered, just to create a bit of challenge, and then G minor 7th, and then I'm also going to provide a 5 of the 2 chord, so I'll make a G altered as well. Okay, which gets us back to C minor 7. So the chord sequence I'm playing over will sound like that, there, E flat major 7th, A minor 7 flat 5, D altered, G minor 7th, and then G altered, okay. And what I'm thinking about with this exercise is I'm just going to play on every single beat, and as soon as so the first scale that we'd be using is the C Dorian. The second scale that we're using, and again I go into more detail on the original video, but I'm going to be using an F half whole diminished scale. Then a B flat major 7, I'll be playing a B Ionian, B flat Ionian. E flat Lydian for the next one. Then I'm going to be using the Locrian or the raised second. Then a D altered. Then a G Dorian. And I explain why I go for the Dorian in the other video. And then a G altered. So those are the scale choices that I'm using, and the idea now is to play on every single beat in the bar, and as soon as I get to the next bar, whatever scale I'm going into, I need to play the next consecutive note of that scale. Now on a piano that's quite easy because I can see everything visually. I've got 1 octave, okay, so when I'm playing the Dorian and I want to move into the next scale, so long as I know the kind of the notes of the scale obviously, and also like the visual construction of the scale, I can kind of see it very clearly on a piano, and obviously each octave is exactly the same pattern all the way up on the piano. I'm not saying it's easy on the piano, but it's much easier than something like a guitar or a bass. I don't play wind instruments, so I can't talk for trumpets and saxophones or flutes or whatever, but I would imagine there's challenges there as well. But with a bass or a guitar, we've got 2 problems, because if I said to practice that constant scale, you might well know the Dorian, and you might know the half whole, diminished scale. But are you supposed to? The question you'd be asking is, are you supposed to be, changing at each string, or do you keep going up 1 string, or are you supposed to be sort of, how far do you go up, and do you go along for a bit and then up? So the answer is you do both things, and this is the way I tend to practice it. So first of all, what I'll tend to do is just select 1 string, and I'm going to take the G in this instance, the top string. Okay, this is a 5-string bass, so there's a low B there, we've got the G there. What I'm going to do is actually do the constant scale exercise from this octave to here. Okay, so from G all the way through to this G here. I could do it if you don't have a kind of like the 24th fret bass. Again, you could do it from this G to this G. So what I've done is limit myself. So I'm not trying to think of the entire bass. I'm just going to limit myself to 1 string. Now on a guitar, you could do that on the E string, for example, which might make sense, and then try it on the B string. So if I go from G to G, I'm going to think of a C Dorian, the notes of a C Dorian first of all. So if I plonk my foot down here, I've got this sound. guff note there. So that's the C Dorian. It would start here, obviously, on C, but I'm thinking of the notes of B flat major or C Dorian or G Aeolian. I'm actually thinking of it as just a C Dorian personally, and I'm just doing it on that one string, and I make sure I can go up and down. Okay. Now the next chord is an F7 flat 9, and in this instance I'm going to be using an F half whole diminished scale, or technically I'm actually using an F sharp diminished. Okay. Now the configuration on the bass from G to G, it's actually going to be these notes here. It's not got a G in it. So those are the notes of the F sharp diminished scale that I'm using. The next two scales are exactly the same because I'm still using a B flat major over B flat major and over the E flat because it's a leading. Then I've got A minor 7 flat 5, and here I'm going to use the Locrian with a raised second. Okay, so this sound. I've got a D altered, and again I'm just going between G and G. Now I don't have a G in the D altered, so I'm going to be starting here. Technically that's an E flat melodic minor. Then I've got a G minor 7th. And here I'm using a Dorian. I could use an Aeolian mode, and technically that would be correct in the key that we're in, but actually I quite like the sort of colour of the Dorian mode, and in the case of Autumn Leaves it kind of resolves on that G minor, so with when you resolve onto a minor chord it's not really functioning in the same way as a normal kind of minor 6th, so I will actually use a Dorian just simply because I prefer the sound of it. The final chord, I'm just adding this G altered sound, and again this is a really different way of soloing, because usually, you know, if you're playing bass, a lot of, scale patterns basically sort of go this way across the neck, okay, in sort of particular configurations. And in fact, you can do that. So I do learn the scales this way around as well, and I can do the constant scale that way, but it's quite an interesting one to just stick with this one string and see if you can now move between the scales. Now, because I can't accompany myself at the same time I'm playing bass, I'm actually going to put a root note in as I do this particular exercise, but what I've already done is just map out each of the scales that I've got over those 8 chords. Remember, C minor 7, F7 flat 9, B flat major 7, E flat major 7, A minor 7 flat 5, D7, G minor 7, G altered, okay, and I'm going to play 1, 2, 3, 4, then I'm into the F sharp diminished, then I'm into back into the B flat Ionian. Now as soon as I get to G, I've obviously got to come back down again, that's the 6th. Then I'm on to an E flat Lydian. Then I'm on to the A minor 7 flat 5, so the A Locrian with a raised second. Again, that's a choice. I can play just a normal Locrian if I wanted to, but I prefer that kind of raised second. I just feel it's got this kind of much more open sort of sound to it, a bit more atmospheric. So if I'm on this bit here, and then I'm onto a D altered, and then I'm on to a G Dorian, and now I'm on to the G altered. Now I can continue that exercise. Now I've got to keep going. So C Dorian, then F diminished, F sharp diminished, B flat Ionian, then onto E flat Lydian. Then we're on to the A Locrian raised second. Then D altered, G Dorian, method. Now, here's an interesting bit of advice when you're doing this, because this allows you to then play sort of solos. So I'm kind of just moving really technically around one kind of string. Now that's not the only way I would solo, but it's a really nice, almost like, feels like you'd be playing a saxophone, a much more sort of linear kind of motion up and down. I can do that exercise then on each string, and it means I really, really know my way around each mode and how they interrelate to the next mode, and it teaches you little bits about where your gaps in your knowledge are in terms of moving around different modes. I will do exactly the same thing. So for example, I've also learned all of my modes down at this end of the neck. I won't do the whole lot at the moment, but for example, C Dorian down here. Then we've got that F sharp diminished. Then we've got B flat, Ionian, and so on and so forth. So we can do exactly the same thing and just limit yourself, for example, the constant scale exercise to perhaps just that range of the frets, the open string up to about the 4th fret. Then you can do things like practice the constant scale exercise again from, say, the 5th fret to the 9th fret. So it's a way of basically really, really getting to understand the modes and the kind of how they move around. Once you can do that, then you should be able to, you know, move to each string until you can kind of like literally move that way or up, so up and across. But I find the constant scale exercise, in terms of learning really sort of, you know, the relationship to modes, it's a frustrating exercise, and it actually takes quite a bit of work to map it out, but it's a really, really useful one, I think. The one thing I was going to say was that, like the piano, there are visual configurations. So for example, when I play the Dorian mode, I've got this little block here, then 3 white notes here, and then this black note. So I can sort of see that up the piano almost like that. Now, it's difficult to say that you could do that on a bass. Obviously, you've got kind of grid patterns when we're going this way, but when we're going just up a string, you do have, of course, the dot markings. Now, this is a new bass, which I will do a review of later on. I've literally just got it made by the same bass maker that made my last one. But of course, you have got the dot markings. I don't know if you can see it as I held that up to the camera. Whoopsie daisy, new bass, sorry, bass maker. And I still use the dot markings as a kind of visual reference when I'm going up a scale. So for example, when I play the F sharp diminished scale from between G to G, what I've noticed is that I've got 3 non-dots or spaces, 3 spaces, 2 dots, 3 spaces, and it's actually a kind of symmetrical thing. There's 2 dots in the middle here, then I've got 1, 2, 3 here, and then 1, 3, 4 there. Now, once I see that, it's I can't unsee it. It's a kind of pattern that goes across the neck in the same way visually I can see it on the piano. So this is another. It's not necessarily the only way you want to do it, because obviously you need to hear the scale and be able to sing with it. But it's also really useful to be able to kind of visualise it across the neck. And so I do use dot markings to visualise, almost like a piano, what the configuration of the notes are, particularly when I'm going up and down the actual strings. Anyway, hopefully that's helpful. And I will be at some point doing an entire kind of bass course, which I'm going to record over the course of next year, particularly in terms of solo bass, but also how to actually solo in terms of jazz. Anyway, thank you very much.